The last words my husband Marcus Thorne ever said to me weren't screamed in anger or whispered in sorrow. They were delivered with the calm, cutting precision of a surgeon severing a limb. He stood in the marble foyer of the home I thought we built together, his bespoke suit immaculate, his expression one of profound disappointment, as if I were a failing investment. "Elena," he said, adjusting his Cartier cufflinks. "Let's be honest. You are nothing without me. I created you. I gave you this life. Without my name, my money, my influence, you will simply fade away." He closed the door with a soft final click, leaving me alone in a gilded cage he had just unlocked, convinced I would never learn to fly. He walked away proud, a man shedding dead weight. He had no idea he had just unleashed a hurricane. The silence that followed the click of that door was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, a heavy blanket of nothing that smothered the air in our 10,000-square-foot Manhattan penthouse. For 5 years, this home had been my universe. I had chosen the specific shade of gray, for the walls overseen the installation of the Italian marble and curated every piece of art that hung in its cavernous rooms. But in that moment, it felt like a stranger's house. It was Marcus's monument to his own success, and I was just one of the meticulously chosen decorations he was now discarding. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a man. He was a force of nature on Wall Street. A senior vice president at Blackwood Capital before he was 35, he moved through the world with an unshakable certainty that it would bend to his will. And for a long time I believed it too. I was Elena Vance, a bright but directionless art history major when I met him. He was dazzling, a supernova of ambition and charm. He told me I was the calm in his storm, the elegant counterpart to his raw power. I gave up my quiet ambitions of becoming a museum curator to become Mrs. Thorne, a role I played with dutiful perfection. I hosted his dinners, networked with the wives of his colleagues, and managed a household staff with quiet efficiency. I was his partner in every way except on paper, where it mattered his business. "I handle the stress, you handle the life," he'd say, patting my hand. It sounded like a partnership, but it was a gilded cage. My opinions on his deals were met with condescending smiles. My own small investment ideas based on meticulous research I did in my spare time were dismissed as cute hobbies. I had a degree in data analysis that I'd earned before we married, a skill I loved, but he saw it as a quaint little quirk irrelevant to the real world of high finance he inhabited. The woman he was leaving me for was Chloe Sterling. I'd seen her picture in a gossip column, clinging to his arm at some charity gala I had been too unwell to attend. She was 24, a model-turned-influencer, whose entire life was a performance of curated perfection for millions of followers. She was everything. I wasn't loud, flashy, and utterly uncomplicated. She was an accessory that screamed success in a way a quiet, intelligent wife no longer did. The divorce was swift and brutal. Marcus's lawyers, a pack of sharks from a top-tier firm, painted me as a gold digger who had contributed nothing. My own lawyer, a kind but overwhelmed man I found in a suburban directory, was completely outmatched. They argued that my contribution to the marriage was non-financial and therefore less valuable. Marcus magnanimously offered me a one-time settlement of $500,000 and the right to keep my personal belongings. The penthouse, the Hamptons house, the art collection, the shared accounts, all of it was his. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed in a haze of love and trust was ironclad. "It's more than fair, Elena," Marcus had said during the final mediation, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's enough to get you a nice little apartment somewhere quiet, a fresh start." He didn't see it as ending a marriage. He saw it as closing a redundant division of his personal empire. I remember sitting there in a sterile conference room overlooking the city, my hands trembling as I signed the papers. My signature, which once felt so powerful next to his on our marriage license, was now just the frantic scrawl of a woman being erased. That first night alone, I walked through the empty penthouse. The staff had been dismissed. The silence was broken only by the hum of the city far below. I saw his face everywhere in our wedding photos, on the digital frame, in the reflection of the dark windows, in the confident posture of the abstract statues he loved. His words echoed in my mind. "You are nothing without me. You will simply fade away." I sank onto the cold leather of the sofa. He had chosen a piece so modern and uncomfortable it felt like a metaphor for our marriage. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the full crushing weight of my own insignificance in his world. I had poured my soul into being his partner, his support system, his wife. I had subsumed my identity into his, until I wasn't sure where Elena Vance ended and Mrs. Thorne began. And now he had ripped that identity away, leaving a gaping void. He walked away proud not just of his success, but of his power to unmake me. As I sat there, a ghost in my own life, I made a silent, desperate vow. He was wrong. I would not fade away. I just didn't know how I was going to prove it. Leaving the penthouse felt like shedding a skin I had long outgrown. The doorman who had greeted me with a deferential, "Good morning, Mrs. Thorne," for 5 years now looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity as I loaded 2 suitcases and 3 boxes into the back of a standard yellow cab. I was no longer Mrs. Thorne. I was just Elena. My nice little apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens. The floors creaked, the radiator hissed like an angry snake, and the view was of a brick wall. The settlement money, which had seemed like a fortune in the lawyer's office, dwindled at an alarming rate after I paid the security deposit first and last month's rent, and bought the barest of essentials. The vast empty space of the penthouse was replaced by a claustrophobic clutter I couldn't seem to organize. The first few months were a blur of rejection and despair. I applied for jobs at museums and art galleries, but my resume had a 5-year gap labeled homemaker. The interviewers were polite but dismissive. I was overqualified in education and underqualified in recent experience. The world had moved on while I was busy color coordinating Marcus's sock drawer. I saw Marcus everywhere. His face was on the cover of Forbes, celebrating a record-breaking quarter for Blackwood Capital. He and Chloe were splashed across page 6, vacationing in St. Bart's, looking golden and untouchable. Each image was a fresh twist of the knife, reinforcing his narrative. He was ascending, and I was plummeting. His words haunted my sleepless nights. I created you. Had he? Was I just a reflection? A pale moon who couldn't shine without his sun. My savings account was bleeding out. I started taking on freelance data entry work, typing numbers into spreadsheets for pennies per word until my eyes burned. It was mindless, soul-crushing work, but it paid for groceries. One particularly bleak Tuesday, after receiving my 5th rejection email of the day, I hit my breaking point. I was sitting on my lumpy second-hand sofa eating instant noodles out of a mug when I dissolved into ragged, hopeless sobs. I had become the cliché, the discarded wife living a shadow of her former life, destined to become a cautionary tale. In the depths of that despair, a name surfaced in my mind: Dr. Evelyn Reed. She had been my thesis advisor in college, a brilliant no-nonsense professor of data science who had seen a spark in me. She had been disappointed when I'd abandoned my PhD track to marry Marcus. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 years. Swallowing my pride, my fingers trembling, I found her number and called. Elena Vance. Evelyn's voice was as sharp and clear as I remembered. To what do I owe the pleasure? The dam broke. I told her everything. The divorce, the settlement, the tiny apartment, the rejections, the suffocating feeling of failure. I expected pity or an "I told you so." I got neither. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Good, you needed this. That man was an anchor, not a sail. He didn't create you, Elena, he contained you. Now stop crying over a man who wouldn't throw you a life raft and start building your own damn ship." Her words were like a splash of ice water. "Build it with what, Evelyn? I have nothing." "You have your brain," she shot back. A brain that was once at the top of my program. "Do you remember your thesis project? The one you were so passionate about before Thorne distracted you with shiny objects?" I did remember. It felt like a lifetime ago. My project had been about analyzing user engagement metrics, not just clicks and time on page, but trying to quantify emotional response. I had theorized that you could track micro-expressions and biometric feedback through webcams and wearables to create a more intuitive, empathetic user experience. At the time, it was purely theoretical, borderline science fiction. The technology wasn't there yet, I mumbled. The technology is here now, Evelyn said, her voice electric with an energy that traveled through the phone. AI, machine learning, biometric sensors in every watch and phone. The world has caught up to your idea, Elena. The question is, have you caught up to it? That night, for the first time in months, I didn't dream of Marcus. I went to the closet and pulled out a dusty box labeled University. Inside, buried beneath old textbooks, was my thesis. I spread the papers across my small kitchen table, the complex algorithms and theoretical frameworks looking back at me like old friends. A forgotten part of myself, the ambitious, intelligent woman who loved solving complex problems, stirred from her long slumber. Evelyn was right. Marcus hadn't created me. He had found something unique and put it on a shelf to admire, letting it gather dust. As I traced the lines of my old equations, a flicker of an idea, small but intensely bright, ignited in the darkness. I wasn't fading away. I was just at the beginning. The settlement wasn't a consolation prize. It was seed money. My tiny apartment wasn't a prison. It was my headquarters. And I wasn't building a ship. I was going to build an empire. The next year was a monastic existence fueled by cheap coffee, takeout pizza, and a singular obsessive focus. My apartment transformed from a symbol of my downfall into a bustling, chaotic laboratory. Whiteboards covered the walls, filled with complex flowcharts and lines of code. Stacks of research papers on machine learning and effective computing teetered precariously on every surface. I barely slept, often working for 20 hours straight, losing track of days and nights. My thesis was the blueprint, but building the reality was a monumental task. The core idea was to create a software platform that could analyze a user's subconscious emotional response to a digital interface in real time. It wouldn't just tell a company if a user clicked the buy button. It would tell them the precise moment the user felt joy, frustration, confusion, or trust. It would read the subtle involuntary cues, a fractional widening of the pupils, a minute spike in heart rate via a smartwatch, a fleeting micro-expression of disgust captured by a webcam, and translate that raw biometric data into actionable design insights. I named the project Aura. It was about reading the invisible energy between a person and a screen. I burned through my savings at a terrifying rate. I bought used servers and processors, cobbled together a crude but functional rig, and spent thousands on academic licenses for datasets I needed to train my AI models. I taught myself 3 new coding languages through online tutorials, my brain aching with the strain of absorbing so much new information. There were countless moments of failure, code that would crash for days on end, algorithms that produced nonsensical results, models that couldn't distinguish a smile from a grimace. During one particularly dark week, when a critical bug had erased a month of work, I almost gave up. I found myself scrolling through Chloe's Instagram. There she was, laughing with Marcus on a yacht in the Mediterranean, a diamond bracelet on her wrist that was probably worth more than my entire operation. The caption read, "Living my best life with the man who makes it all possible." A cold, hard fury, purer than any sadness I had felt, seized me. I threw my phone across the room. He makes it all possible, the same lie he had told me. In that moment, Chloe wasn't my rival. She was just my successor in the role of the beautiful dependent woman propped up by Marcus Thorne. I wasn't going to be that woman. Ever again. That anger became my fuel. I went back to the whiteboard, and with a clarity born of rage, I saw the flaw in my code. I worked for 72 hours straight, and when I ran the program again, it worked. The first test was rudimentary. I pulled up the website for a famously clunky, user-unfriendly airline. I enabled my own webcam and heart rate monitor. Aura's interface, still just a series of data streams and graphs on a black screen, came to life. It pinpointed the exact moment my brow furrowed in confusion at the convoluted booking process. It graphed the spike in my heart rate when a hidden fee appeared at checkout. It flagged the micro-expression of contempt when a pop-up ad obscured the final confirmation button. It was alive. It was reading my emotions. I refined it, built a sleek user interface, and created a powerful visualization dashboard. Companies wouldn't just get a spreadsheet. They would get an emotional journey map of their customers, pinpointing frustration hotspots and moments of delight on their websites and apps. This wasn't just data analytics. It was digital empathy at scale. Evelyn was my only link to the outside world. She reviewed my code, challenged my assumptions, and connected me with a few of her brighter graduate students who helped me with beta testing in exchange for a slice of a company that didn't yet exist. After a year of relentless work, I had a working prototype and a business plan. But I was out of money. My final credit card was maxed out. My bank account held less than $100. I had built the engine, but I had no fuel to make it go. It was time to step out of the cave and face the dragons of the financial world Marcus had once ruled the venture capitalists. Entering the world of venture capital was like stepping onto another planet. The sleek, glass-walled offices in Silicon Alley were a world away from my cluttered Queens apartment, and the men who inhabited them, clad in expensive casual wear, felt like younger tech bro versions of Marcus. They exuded the same aura of effortless power and casual dismissal. The first few pitches were disastrous. I was a woman with no track record, no team, and a product that sounded like science fiction. They would listen with polite skepticism, their eyes glazing over as I explained the nuances of effective computing. "So it's a focus group on steroids?" one VC asked, checking his Apple Watch. "Who's your CTO?" Another inquired, clearly assuming I couldn't be the one who wrote the code. "It's a great idea, very ambitious." A third told me, his tone making it clear he meant impossible. "Come back when you have a man on the team who can handle the tech side." The rejection was constant and demoralizing. It was Marcus's voice echoing in a dozen different mouths. "You are nothing without me." They saw a divorced woman who had been out of the workforce, not a brilliant innovator. My past as Mrs. Thorne, which I tried to omit from my pitch, was a ghost that followed me. One VC, David Hayes, even recognized my name. "Wait, Vance, weren't you married to Marcus Thorne at Blackwood?" he'd asked. When I confirmed, the mood in the room shifted. I was no longer a potential founder. I was a piece of gossip, a fallen socialite playing at business. He passed on the investment. I was down to my last few $1,000s money I'd gotten from selling a pair of diamond earrings Marcus had given me, the last remnant of my old life. I had one final meeting scheduled with a firm called Catalyst Ventures. They had a reputation for being ruthless, but also for making bold, unconventional bets. The partner I was meeting was named Liam Sterling. The name gave me a moment's pause, but I dismissed it as a coincidence. I walked into their boardroom feeling like I was facing a firing squad. Liam Sterling was not what I expected. He was sharp, intense, and younger than the other VCs, with a gaze that seemed to see right through the nervous facade I had constructed. He didn't interrupt me once during my 20-minute presentation. He just watched his fingers, steepled, his expression unreadable. When I finished, the room was silent. I braced for the polite dismissal. "Your sample data set." He began, his voice quiet but commanding. "It shows a 94.6% accuracy in identifying the 7 primary microexpressions. The industry standard for automated recognition is barely 80%. "How?" He hadn't asked about my ex-husband or my team. He had gone straight to the heart of the technology. For the next hour, he grilled me. He didn't just ask about the business plan. He attacked the algorithm itself. He poked holes in my methodology, questioned my data sources, and challenged my projections. It wasn't condescending. It was the rigorous intellectual sparring I had missed, the kind of conversation I used to have with Evelyn. I met every question with a confident, data-backed answer. I didn't just know the business. I knew the science because I had built it from the ground up. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Marcus Thorne is a fool." He said so casually it took my breath away. I stared at him, speechless. I've met him at fundraisers. All ego, no substance. He wouldn't know a truly disruptive idea if it hit him in the face, Liam continued. He thought your value was in the reflection you cast on him. Men like that are always blind to the real source of light. He paused, looking directly at me. Catalyst Ventures is in. We'll lead your seed round. $2 million for 20% of the company. Standard terms. We'll have a term sheet for you by the end of the day. I felt a dizzying wave of vertigo. $2 million. It was more money than I could comprehend. It was real. It was happening. There's one more thing, he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. My full name is Liam Hayes. I run the North American division. The senior partner of the firm is my uncle David Hayes, the VC who passed on you last week. My jaw dropped. He called me after your meeting, Liam explained. He said some socialite ex-wife of Marcus Thorne's came in with a crazy idea. He was dismissive, but he also mentioned your data on micro-expression accuracy. That's what got my attention. David is old school. He invests in pedigrees. I invest in technology, and your tech Ms. Vance is the most exciting thing I've seen all year. I walked out of that building and onto the bustling streets of Manhattan, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in years. The city skyline, which once seemed to mock me with its scale and indifference, now looked like a kingdom of possibilities. I hadn't just secured funding. I had been seen. Someone had looked past the ghost of Mrs. Thorne and seen Elena Vance, the creator, the builder, the source of the light. The irony was so thick I could taste it, the very connection to Marcus that had closed. So many doors had in a twisted way opened the one that mattered most. With Catalyst Ventures backing Aura Analytics, the official name of my company exploded into existence. The $2 million felt like rocket fuel. We moved out of my apartment and into a sleek loft office in Soho. I hired the 2 brilliant graduate students who had helped me beta test as my first employees. Evelyn Reed came on board as a chief scientific advisor. And Liam Hayes, true to his word, became more than just an investor. He became a mentor and a champion. He joined our board, his sharp insights and ruthless business acumen pushing us to be better, faster, and smarter. He never treated me with the kid gloves the other men had. He challenged my decisions, debated strategy, and respected me as his equal. There was a spark between us, an intellectual and professional chemistry that was exhilarating, but we kept it strictly professional. My focus was singular, building my company. Aura Analytics was an immediate game changer. Our first clients were small tech startups, and our results for them were staggering. We helped an e-commerce site redesign its checkout process, increasing conversion rates by 40% in 1 quarter, simply by eliminating frustration hotspots our software identified. We helped a mobile gaming company tweak its user interface to maximize moments of delight, doubling its user retention. The word began to spread through Silicon Alley. We weren't just a focus group on steroids. We were a crystal ball that showed companies precisely what their customers felt. We secured a Series A funding round of $20 million, then a Series B of $50 million. Our valuation soared. Our team grew from 3 people in a loft to 300 in a multi-floor office overlooking Bryant Park. My life transformed again, but this time I was the architect. I wasn't Mrs. Thorne living in a world built by my husband. I was Elena Vance, CEO. I traded my cramped walk-up for a beautiful duplex in Tribeca, one I bought with my own money. The art on the walls was chosen by me for me. My clothes were no longer elegant costumes for corporate dinners, but power suits and sharp dresses that I wore into boardrooms where I was the one in charge. The media, which had once chronicled my divorce and gossip columns, now featured me in a different section. TechCrunch wrote a feature titled, "The Empathy Engine: How Aura Analytics is Decoding the Digital Heart." I was on Forbes's 40 Under 40 list. A profile in the Wall Street Journal detailed my journey from Park Avenue to power player. They all mentioned the divorce, casting it as my dramatic origin story. I never spoke ill of Marcus in interviews. I simply stated, the end of my marriage provided the catalyst for me to rediscover a passion I had set aside. It was a cool professional statement that was far more damning than any accusation, because it was the truth. I had my own life, my own success, my own name. I rarely thought of him anymore. He was a character from a book I had read long ago. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, 5 years after I had walked out of our old life with 2 suitcases, the past came calling. I was in my corner office preparing for a keynote speech at Tech Forward, New York's largest technology conference, when my assistant buzzed. "Ms. Vance," she said, her voice hesitant, "there's a Marcus Thorne on the line for you. He says it's personal." My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard his voice in half a decade. I stared out the window at the city skyline, my city now. My hand hovered over the phone. A part of me wanted to tell her to hang up, to block the number, to erase him as thoroughly as he had tried to erase me. But another part, a stronger, more curious part, took over. "Put him through," I said, my voice steady and calm. I picked up the receiver, leaned back in my leather chair, and waited. "Elena." His voice was the same, but the arrogant confidence that had defined it was gone, replaced by a strange, hollow tone. I saw you on the cover of Fortune magazine. The $200 million mind. I can't say I'm not surprised." I stayed silent, letting the awkwardness hang in the air. "Listen," he continued, stumbling over his words. "I'm in a bit of a bind. Blackwood is, well, the market's been tough. We're looking to innovate to get an edge in fintech. Your technology? It's revolutionary. I was thinking, perhaps you and we could partner. A joint venture. Your tech, my financial acumen. We were always a great team." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to congratulate me. He was calling to profit from me. He was calling to reclaim what he still on some fundamental level believed was his. He saw my $200 million empire not as something I had built, but as an asset he had somehow misplaced. My silence stretched. I could hear his nervous breathing on the other end of the line. "Elena, are you there?" "We were never a team, Marcus," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "A team implies mutual respect. You and I had a merger, and you dissolved it when you thought the assets were no longer performing." I continued, my voice measured and devoid of the anger that once would have consumed me. "My schedule is rather full. I'm delivering the keynote at Tech Forward tomorrow. If Blackwood Capital is interested in becoming a client of Aura Analytics, you can have your assistant contact my sales department. Their information is on our website." Before he could respond, I placed the receiver gently back in its cradle, cutting the last thread that connected me to him. The call hadn't rattled me. It had confirmed everything. He hadn't changed. But I had. And tomorrow at the conference he was about to find out just how much. The Javits Center was electric. Thousands of people, tech entrepreneurs, investors, engineers, and journalists milled about under the soaring glass ceiling. Giant screens displayed the Aura Analytics logo, a soft, pulsing circle of light. 5 years ago I would have been terrified to stand in front of such a crowd. Tonight I felt a calm, centered sense of purpose. This was my world. I had earned my place here. Backstage, Liam handed me a bottle of water. "Nervous?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Excited," I corrected him with a smile. "This is everything we've worked for." Our relationship had slowly, carefully evolved. The professional respect had deepened into a genuine friendship, which was now blossoming into something more. He saw me for who I was, not who I had been. He celebrated my strength without being intimidated by it. It was a partnership of equals, the kind I once thought was only a dream. "I saw the attendee list," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Marcus Thorne is here. So is Chloe." "I know," I said, my focus unwavering. "He called me yesterday." Liam's eyes widened. "What did he want?" "A partnership," I said, a wry smile touching my lips. "He wants to ride the coattails he threw out in the trash." Liam shook his head in disbelief. "The ego on that man. Do you want me to have security keep him out?" "No." I said, looking towards the stage. Let him watch. Let him see what he discarded. As I was introduced, a wave of applause washed over the auditorium. I walked onto the stage, the spotlight warm on my face. I looked out at the sea of faces, thousands of them all looking at me. And then I saw him. He was in the 5th row. He looked older, his face etched with lines of stress I didn't recognize. The arrogant pride had been replaced by a weary anxiety. Chloe was beside him, no longer the vibrant influencer, but a woman who looked bored and restless, her eyes darting around the room, endlessly scrolling on her phone. She was wearing a dress I recognized from a designer I used to favor. The irony was palpable. She was still playing the part of Mrs. Thorne, a role I had long since abandoned. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of disbelief in his expression, the dawning horror of a man realizing the true scale of his miscalculation. He wasn't looking at the mousy, heartbroken wife he had left in a marble mausoleum. He was looking at a titan of industry, a woman completely and utterly in her power. I turned my attention from him and smiled at the audience. "Good evening," I began, my voice ringing clear and strong through the auditorium. 5 years ago, I was told that without the support and influence of a powerful man, I would simply fade away. That my ideas were cute hobbies and my value was decorative. This is a story that many women in this industry and in every industry are told every single day. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the standard tech keynote. That narrative is a lie. I continued, my gaze sweeping across the room, deliberately avoiding Marcus. It's a lie designed to keep talent on the sidelines, to keep innovators from innovating. The most valuable asset you will ever have is not the name you carry or the network you inherit. It's the fire in your own mind. It's the relentless belief in your own ideas, especially when the world tells you they are impossible. For the next 40 minutes, I didn't just talk about aura analytics. I told my story. I talked about the power of rock bottom, the clarity that comes from failure, and the freedom of having nothing left to lose. I spoke of building something from nothing, fueled by passion and conviction. I laid out my vision for a future where technology was built not just for efficiency, but with empathy. I ended the speech with a direct look at the camera that was live streaming to the world. To anyone out there who has ever been told you are nothing without someone else, let your work be your answer. Build your own damn ship. Build your own monument. Build your own empire. And never ever let anyone else tell you the limits of your light. The auditorium erupted. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation that went on and on. It was a roar of approval, not just for my company, but for my story. As I stood there soaking it in, I allowed myself one final glance at the 5th row. Chloe was gone, and Marcus was still sitting there, frozen amidst a sea of cheering people. He looked small, insignificant, a ghost at a feast he couldn't comprehend. He wasn't looking at me with anger or regret. He was looking at me with the blank, hollow stare of a man who had just witnessed the world he thought he understood turned completely upside down. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had fundamentally failed to recognize value, the one sin for which Wall Street never grants forgiveness. The post-keynote reception was a whirlwind of congratulations. Industry leaders, rival CEOs, and young aspiring founders all wanted a moment to talk, to connect, to praise the speech. Liam was by my side, a proud, solid presence in the chaos. I felt a profound sense of peace. The validation wasn't from them. It was from within. The applause was just a pleasant echo of a victory I had already won for myself years ago in a tiny Queens apartment. As the crowd began to thin, I saw him making his way towards me. Marcus moved with a hesitant, almost shuffling gait that was alien to the confident predator I once knew. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. Liam saw him too, and tensed, but I put a calming hand on his arm. "It's okay," I murmured. "I need to do this." Liam nodded, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, and stepped back, giving us space but remaining close by. Marcus stopped a few feet away, looking not at my face, but at the Aura Analytics logo on the banner behind me. "That was Quite a speech, Elena, he managed to say, his voice strained. I have a lot to say these days. I replied, my tone neutral. There was no anger, no bitterness. There was nothing. He was a business transaction from my past, an account that had long since been closed. Look about my call. He started, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were filled with a desperate, grasping plea. What I said was out of line. I've made a lot of mistakes. Chloe left me 6 months ago. Took a ridiculous settlement. Blackwood is restructuring. My division is being phased out. I'm facing a forced early retirement. He gave a short, humorless laugh. It turns out the world I mastered doesn't have much use for a 50-year-old analog man in a digital age. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. The woman I knew, the Elena I married, she was kind. She was forgiving. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking you for the sake of what we once had to help me. A consulting role, a position on your board. Anything. I can help you navigate the financial world. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever heard. The master of the universe begging for a lifeline from the woman he had declared would be nothing without him. He wasn't appealing to my business sense. He was trying to leverage a history he himself had incinerated. He was trying to cash in on an emotional connection he had voided. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and I felt not hatred or even pity, but a profound and final indifference. He was no longer the villain of my story or the catalyst for my success. He was just a footnote. The Elena you married is gone, Marcus. I said, my voice soft but unshakable. You made sure of that. And you're right, she was kind and forgiving. But the woman standing in front of you now is a CEO, and she doesn't make decisions based on nostalgia. She makes them based on value. And frankly, your brand of financial acumen is something my company has evolved beyond. I let the words sink in. He flinched as if I'd struck him. You once told me that you created me. I continued, delivering the final quiet blow. You were wrong. You didn't create me. You just revealed me to myself. The best thing you ever did for me, the most valuable contribution you ever made to my life, was closing that door and walking away. So for that, and for that alone, thank you. I gave him a small final nod, a gesture of dismissal, not of peace. Then I turned my back on him for the last time and walked towards Liam, who was waiting with a warm, understanding smile. I didn't look back to see Marcus's reaction. It no longer mattered. As Liam and I walked out of the convention center and into the glittering New York night, I felt the last ghost of my past dissolve into the air. Marcus hadn't faded away. He was just another man in a suit whose time had passed. But I was just getting started. My empire wasn't built on revenge. It was built on a foundation of my own making, and its glittering towers were pointed towards a future that was entirely beautifully and powerfully my own. The weeks following the Tech Forward conference were a blur of triumphant momentum. The keynote speech had gone viral, reverberating far beyond the tech community. It was quoted in articles about female leadership, dissected on business podcasts, and shared by millions on social media. My story, once a private source of shame, had become a public symbol of resilience. Aura Analytics was inundated with partnership offers and resumes from the brightest minds in the industry. Our valuation tipped over the $250 million mark, and the future seemed like an endless ascending highway. My personal life had found a beautiful, steady rhythm with Liam. Our partnership was a quiet dance of equals built on late-night strategy sessions over takeout cartons and lazy Sunday mornings spent reading in his sun-drenched apartment. With him, I wasn't a comeback story or a CEO. I was just Elena. The ghosts of my past had finally been exorcised, and for the first time, I felt that the life I was living was not a reaction to my past, but a creation of my own design. It was on a crisp Tuesday morning that the past sent a new, unexpected echo into my glass tower. My executive assistant Sarah buzzed my intercom, her voice laced with an unusual note of confusion. "Ms. Vance," she said, "there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insistent. She gave her name as Christina Cole, but her ID says Chloe Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. Chloe. I pictured her as I'd last seen her in the 5th row at the Javits Center, her face a mask of bored indifference, a perfect porcelain doll. Then I pictured her on that yacht clinging to Marcus's arm, the living embodiment of my replacement. Every defense mechanism in my body went on high alert. "Tell her I'm unavailable," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "and add that name to the security block list." "I tried Ms. Vance," Sarah replied, her voice dropping. "She started crying. She said to tell you she was wrong about everything and that you are the only person in the world who would understand." The words hung in the air between us. The only person who would understand. It was a bizarre, manipulative-sounding statement, and yet it burrowed under my skin. Liam had always said that true strength wasn't just about winning battles, but about understanding the battlefield from all sides. Curiosity, a dangerous and powerful emotion, warred with my instinct to protect the peace I had fought so hard to build. "Send her in," I said, surprising myself. "But stay on the intercom, Sarah, and have security stand by." A minute later, the woman who walked into my office was not the Chloe Sterling from page 6. The glamorous, confident shell was gone, shattered into a million pieces. She was thin, her expensive dress hanging loosely on her frame. Her professionally highlighted blonde hair was dull, her roots showing. Her face, stripped of its usual camera-ready makeup, was pale and puffy, her blue eyes red-rimmed and haunted. She looked like a ship that had been dashed against the rocks, all her glittering cargo lost to the sea. She stopped in the middle of my office, dwarfed by the floor-to-ceiling windows and the sprawling view of the city. She wouldn't meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on a small abstract sculpture on my desk. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Vance," she whispered, her voice rough. "It's Elena," I said coolly, not moving from behind my large mahogany desk. It felt like a fortress. "You have 5 minutes." She finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a raw, desperate shame. "I saw your speech," she began, her hands twisting the strap of her designer handbag, a relic from her former life. "You talked about him, about being told you were nothing. He said the same things to me." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "I find that hard to believe, Ms. Sterling. From where I sat, you looked like you were living a fairy tale." "It was a performance," she said, shaking her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Everything with Marcus was a performance. I was his shiny new object. He loved showing me off, but he never let me in. The money, the gifts, they weren't presents, they were wages. Payment for playing a part. Every asset, every account, every piece of jewelry was in his name, controlled by his finance managers. He told me it was to protect me from the complexities. He really meant it was to control me completely." She took a shaky breath, the story pouring out of her now. "After his division at Blackwood collapsed, he changed. The world stopped bowing to him, and he became a monster. He started drinking heavily. All the anger he felt at the world, at his own failure, he directed it at me. He told me I was a worthless, stupid parasite. He said at least Elena had a brain, even if she never used it." The irony was sickening. I felt a strange, unwelcome pang of empathy. "When I saw your speech," she continued, "I finally understood. I saw him sitting there looking at you on that stage, and his face. It was pure hatred, not for you, but for himself. That night I packed a bag and left. I thought I'd be okay. He'd given me a settlement when we separated, but it turns out the account he transferred the money from was a trust with so many legal strings attached he was able to freeze it and recall the funds a week later." She was on the verge of sobbing now. "He's suing me, Elena. He's claiming every dress, every bag, every bracelet he ever gave me was a loan against my future as his wife, a contract I broke. His lawyers are burying me. I have nothing. I'm staying on a friend's couch. The woman you see on Instagram, She doesn't exist anymore. She never really did. I sat in stunned silence, processing the ugly, pathetic truth of it all. Marcus hadn't just discarded his accessories, he was now trying to strip them for parts. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice softer now. This was the moment. Her eyes filled with a desperate, terrifying hope met mine. "Because you were right," she choked out. "You said to build your own damn ship. I don't know how. I never learned. I dropped out of community college to model. All I know how to do is be looked at. I need a job, Elena. I'll do anything. I'll answer phones, I'll get coffee, I'll clean the floors. I don't want to fade away. Please." The world tilted. Here was the woman who had replaced me, the living symbol of my humiliation, begging me for a lifeline. The easy answer, the human answer, was no. She was a ghost from a past I had buried. Helping her felt like a betrayal of the woman I had been, the woman who had cried on the floor of that lonely queen's apartment. But then I looked at her, truly looked at her. I didn't see a rival. I saw a victim of the same man, a different casualty of the same war. Marcus had built his life on the idea that women were interchangeable, disposable assets. To turn her away would be to prove him right to participate in his cruel ecosystem. To help her, however, that would be the ultimate repudiation of his entire worldview. It would be an act of power he could never comprehend. I leaned forward and pressed the intercom. "Sarah, please bring in a glass of water." Then I turned back to Chloe. "I am not a charity, and Aura Analytics is not a halfway house. I cannot give you a job." The flicker of hope in her eyes died. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "But," I continued, slowly choosing my words with care, "our marketing department has a 3-month entry-level internship program. It's paid, but it's grueling. You'll be fetching coffee, but you'll also be learning data analytics, campaign strategy, and market research. You will report to the junior manager, and you will be treated no differently than any other intern. If at the end of 3 months your performance is exceptional, we can discuss a permanent position. If it's not, you're out. No second chances." Chloe stared at me, her mouth agape, unable to process what I was saying. "This isn't a gift, Chloe," I said, my voice firm. "This is an opportunity. What you build with it is entirely up to you. The work starts Monday at 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." Tears streamed silently down her face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of shock, of disbelief, and of a fragile, nascent gratitude. She nodded, unable to speak, then turned and walked out of my office on unsteady legs. When she was gone, Liam came in, his expression a mixture of concern and awe. "I heard," he said quietly. "Are you sure about this, Elena?" I looked out the window at the city below, at the millions of stories unfolding in the streets. "I'm not doing it for her, Liam," I said, a profound sense of clarity washing over me. "And I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me. Marcus built his empire by convincing people they were worthless without him. I'm going to build mine by showing them they're not." It was the final piece of my own liberation. My power was no longer defined by my victory over Marcus Thorne, but by my ability to rise above the wreckage he left behind and create something new, something better, something empathetic. My company wasn't just about reading emotions on a screen, it was about honoring them in the real world. And in that moment I understood that the true measure of my $200 million empire wasn't its valuation, but its values. Elena's story is a powerful testament to the incredible strength that can be forged in the fires of betrayal and loss. It's a reminder that our value is never determined by someone else's opinion or their presence in our lives. Marcus Thorne thought he was closing a chapter when in reality he was forcing Elena to write an epic new novel where she was the hero. She didn't just rebuild her life, she engineered a new one better and stronger than before, proving that the most profound success often begins at the very moment we feel most completely erased. Her journey from a heartbroken ex-wife to a $200 million tech mogul shows us that rock bottom can be the most solid foundation upon which to build an empire. If Elena's story of turning betrayal into triumph resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up to let us know. Share it with someone who might need to hear that their greatest chapter is still ahead of them. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story of incredible resilience and ultimate victory. Thank you for listening. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but for Mark Jacobs it was about to be served on the polished white marble floor of a luxury car dealership. When he divorced his wife Amelia, he called her dreams of running a small online business cute and unambitious. 5 years later, he decided it was time to show her what real success looked like. He bought a brand new screaming yellow Lamborghini, a monument to his ego, and orchestrated a chance encounter to rub it in her face. He expected her to be jealous, maybe even regretful. What he didn't expect was that the woman he'd belittled didn't just have a successful business. She held the keys to his new prized possession and the entire building it came from. This is the story of how a show of arrogance led to the most crushing humiliation imaginable. Mark Jacobs believed in symbols. To him, success wasn't a feeling or a state of mind. It was something you could see, touch, and most importantly, show off. It was the glint of a Swiss watch on his wrist, the sharp cut of a Tom Ford suit, and the hushed admiration in a restaurant when he dropped his platinum card. For the past 5 years, ever since the divorce, he had been meticulously constructing an empire of these symbols, each one a brick in the wall he built around his own insecurity. The divorce from Amelia Sterling had been in his mind a necessary amputation. She was the opposite of a symbol. She was quiet, substantive, and found joy in things he couldn't quantify. A well-read book, a walk through a park, or the slow, steady growth of her little online boutique that sold handcrafted leather goods. During their final acrimonious arguments, he had sneered at her ambition. "An online shop, Amelia, it's cute. A nice little hobby to keep you busy while a real man builds an empire." He had built that empire, or at least a convincing facsimile of it. His consulting firm, Jacobs & Associates, had landed a few major contracts, catapulting him into a new tax bracket. He'd moved into a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, and for the past year had been dating Tiffany Monroe, a 25-year-old influencer whose entire existence was a curated collection of symbols. She was in every way the anti-Amelia. But one symbol was missing, the ultimate symbol. The one that screamed, "I have arrived," so loudly it deafened all whispers of doubt. A supercar. That's what brought him to Prestige Automotive Group, the city's most exclusive dealership. The showroom was less a car lot and more a modern art gallery. Gleaming machines sat under strategically placed spotlights on a floor of impossibly white polished marble. The air smelled of expensive leather and a faint, clean scent of metal. This was a temple of wealth, and Mark was here to worship. His target was a Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider in Giallo Inti, a yellow so bright it was almost violent. It was vulgar, audacious, and completely impractical. It was perfect. Tiffany clung to his arm, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, Mark, it's even better in person. The color people will literally stop and stare everywhere we go." "That's the point, darling," Mark said, a smug grin spreading across his face. A salesman named James approached them, his smile practiced and deferential. "An excellent choice, sir. The V10 engine is a masterpiece of engineering. 640 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Mark waved a dismissive hand. "I've read the specs. Let's talk numbers." He enjoyed the dance of negotiation not because he needed a discount, but because it reinforced his position of power. He made James work for the commission, questioning every fee, every add-on before finally agreeing to the full sticker price with a sigh, as if he were doing them a favor. As he signed the paperwork in a glass-enclosed office, his mind wasn't on the six-figure wire transfer. It was on Amelia. He pictured her in her modest, suburban home, the one she'd insisted on keeping after the divorce. He imagined her packing one of her leather bags to ship to a customer, her hands probably smudged with dye. He pictured the look on her face when he pulled up in this roaring yellow beast. It wouldn't just be a car, it would be a verdict. A final undeniable judgment on who had won their separation. "So when can I take delivery?" Mark asked, tapping his pen impatiently. "We just need to complete the final prep and detailing, Mr. Jacobs," James replied. "It will be ready for you tomorrow afternoon. We can have it delivered to your residence, of course." Mark scoffed. "No, I'll pick it up myself. I want to drive it right out of the showroom." He wanted the full experience, the curtain pull, the applause. He wanted the moment. That night he could barely sleep. He scrolled through pictures of the car, rehearsing the conversation he'd have with Amelia. He wouldn't call her. No, that was too direct, too needy. It had to be a chance encounter. He knew she still frequented a small cafe, the Daily Grind, every Saturday morning. It was a habit from their marriage he'd always found tedious. Now it was the perfect stage for his triumph. He would park the Lamborghini right out front, the yellow so loud it would be impossible to ignore. He'd walk in feigned surprise and then, with Tiffany on his arm, deliver the killing blow with casual condescension. "Mark, are you listening?" Tiffany's voice broke through his reverie. She was sitting up in bed looking at him with a pout. "I asked what our first post should be. A boomerang of the Doors going up or a cinematic reel with a Drake song?" Mark smiled. She was beautifully simple. "Both, darling," he said, pulling her close. "We'll do both." He was no longer just Mark Jacobs' successful consultant. Tomorrow he would be reborn as Mark Jacobs, the man who had everything. And he would make sure the one person who he felt had ever doubted him would be there to witness it. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for a public execution of an old life. Mark spent 2 hours getting ready. He chose a pair of designer jeans, a crisp white shirt, left artfully unbuttoned at the top, and a pair of sunglasses that cost more than Amelia's entire monthly mortgage. Tiffany, a vision in a white sundress, looked like she had been born to be passenger seat decoration. Picking up the car from Prestige Automotive Group was everything he had dreamed of. The staff gathered as his Huracan was driven onto a central turntable under the showroom's main chandelier. They applauded. James handed him a carbon fiber key box with the reverence of a religious offering. The moment Mark fired up the V10 engine, the showroom vibrated with a deep guttural roar. It was the sound of victory. He drove with the top down the engine's symphony, echoing off the downtown skyscrapers. Every red light was an opportunity for people to stare, to take pictures, to openly gawk at his success. Tiffany was in heaven, phone in hand, documenting every second for her legion of followers. "This is literally the best day of my life," she squealed over the engine's noise. "It's just the beginning," Mark yelled back, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He timed their arrival at the Daily Grind perfectly. 10:30 a.m. He knew Amelia would be there, likely tucked into a corner booth with a book and a cappuccino. He did 2 slow passes before finding the perfect parking spot directly in front of the cafe's large picture window, angled just so. The car took up nearly 2 full spaces. It was an obnoxious, arrogant parking job, and it was entirely intentional. The engine's roar as he shut it off caused half the people in the cafe to look up. He let the scissor door rise slowly, a piece of mechanical theater, before stepping out. He took off his sunglasses, scanned the cafe, and there she was. Amelia Sterling looked almost exactly the same. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple but elegant knot. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. She wasn't looking at the car. She was engrossed in a paperback, a half-empty cup of coffee beside her. For a fleeting second, a pang of something unfamiliar, nostalgia, regret hit him, but he crushed it instantly. This was not the time for weakness. "Showtime," he whispered to Tiffany. He pushed open the cafe door, a small bell tinkling overhead. He strode in, positioning himself near the counter as if to order, and then turned, feigning a sudden shocking realization. Amelia Sterling, is that really you?" He said, his voice a little too loud for the quiet space. She looked up from her book, her expression unreadable. There was no shock, no awe, not even annoyance, just a placid, neutral recognition. "Hello, Mark." "I can't believe it." He continued walking over to her booth. Tiffany trailed behind him, a confused but smiling accessory. "What are the odds of all the places in the city? How have you been?" "I've been well," she said, placing a bookmark in her novel. Her calmness was unnerving. He had expected a flustered reaction, a quick glance out the window at the car, some sign that his display had registered. He got nothing. "This is my girlfriend Tiffany," he said, gesturing grandly. "It's so nice to finally meet you," Tiffany said, her voice sugary sweet. "Mark has told me so much about you." "Has he?" Amelia's eyes met Mark's for a brief moment, and he saw a flicker of something amusement. Pity had angered him. "Yeah, well, things have been pretty crazy," Mark said, leaning against the booth. "Business is booming. We just moved into the new penthouse at the Grandview, and well, you probably saw the new toy I just picked up out front." He jerked a thumb toward the window. Amelia's eyes followed his gesture. She glanced at the garish yellow Lamborghini for no more than 3 seconds before her gaze returned to him. "It's very yellow," she said, her tone flat. "Very yellow." That was it. He felt a surge of frustration. "It's a Huracan Evo Spider. A bit of a step up from that old Subaru you used to drive." "Huh." "The Subaru was practical," she replied evenly. "Practical doesn't close deals," he shot back, his voice hardening. "But I'm sure you're doing well. That little online business of yours. Still selling those leather wallets?" "Bags mostly." "And yes, it's doing well," she said, a small knowing smile finally touching her lips. "It keeps me busy." The smile infuriated him. It was the same smile she'd given him when he told her she lacked ambition. It was a smile that held a secret he wasn't privy to. He felt the need to press harder to crack her serene facade. "Well, that's great. I'm happy for you." "Truly," he said, the insincerity dripping from his words. "It's good to have a hobby. Me, I never have a day off. We're flying to Monaco next month for the Grand Prix, a client's private yacht. It's a tough life." He laughed, a hollow, self-congratulatory sound. Tiffany giggled on cue. "Mark works so hard. He deserves to spoil himself." Amelia simply nodded, taking a slow sip of her coffee. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark had fired his best shots, unveiled his greatest symbol, and all he got in return was polite indifference. He had come here expecting to feel like a king looking down on a commoner. Instead, he felt like a child throwing a tantrum for an unimpressed parent. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, his ego bruised, "we should get going. Lots to do. Big day. It was good seeing you, Amelia." "You too, Mark," she said, her eyes already drifting back to her book as if he were no longer there. As he walked out of the cafe and back to his monument of success, the thrill was gone. The bright yellow shell felt less like a trophy and more like a clown car. Tiffany was chattering away about getting a photo of herself with the car in front of the cute little coffee shop. But Mark wasn't listening. He had shown her. He had laid his success at her feet, and she had looked at it, called it yellow, and turned back to her book. The victory he had craved felt sickeningly hollow, and a new, unsettling thought began to creep into his mind. What if he hadn't been playing the same game as her at all? What if, while he was busy collecting symbols, Amelia had been quietly and effectively building something real? The hollow feeling from the cafe encounter lingered for days. Mark tried to bury it under the roar of the Lamborghini's engine, under late-night parties at his penthouse, and under Tiffany's vapid, constant praise. He posted relentlessly on social media the car in front of landmarks, the car at sunset, the car's steering wheel with his watch strategically in frame. Each post garnered hundreds of likes and fawning comments, a digital balm for his wounded ego. Yet Amelia's calm, unimpressed face was burned into his memory. About 2 weeks after he bought the car, the first sign of trouble appeared. He was cruising downtown music, blasting, enjoying the envious stares, when a small amber light flickered to life on the digital dashboard. Check engine. Mark's heart sank. A check engine light on a brand new $500,000 supercar. It felt like a personal insult, a flaw in the perfection he had purchased. He tried to ignore it, hoping it was a fluke, a sensor error that would reset itself. But it stayed on a persistent glowing accusation on his dashboard. The next day, a second problem emerged. A faint but distinct rattling sound started coming from the passenger side near the rear wheel, especially when he went over small bumps. It was a tiny, insignificant noise that a normal person might not even notice. But to Mark, it was a screeching cacophony. His symbol of flawless, overwhelming success had a rattle. "Can you hear that?" he asked Tiffany, turning down the music. "Hear what, babe?" she asked, busy editing a selfie. "That noise, that rattling sound. Listen." She paused, tilting her head. "I don't hear anything. You're probably just being paranoid. This car is like perfect." But Mark knew he wasn't paranoid. The rattle was real, and with every bump in the road it grew louder in his mind, mocking him. The car was no longer a source of pure pride. It was a source of anxiety. He started avoiding certain roads, cringing before every pothole. The joy of ownership was being rapidly replaced by the fear of imperfection. The final straw came a week later. He had just pulled away from a valet at a high-end restaurant, eager to make a roaring exit, when the car's transmission seemed to hesitate. As he accelerated, there was a jarring lurch, a mechanical hiccup, that sent a jolt through the entire chassis. It felt clumsy, unrefined. It felt cheap. That was it. He couldn't stand it. This wasn't just a car, it was a statement. And his statement was apparently that he was a man who bought faulty, rattling, lurching status symbols. Furious, he drove straight home, the joy of the evening ruined. The next morning he called the service department at Prestige Automotive Group. His tone was clipped and imperious. "This is Mark Jacobs. I purchased a Huracan Evo Spider from you 3 weeks ago, and it's a piece of junk," he snapped at the service advisor who answered the phone. "The check engine light is on, there's a rattle in the rear, and the transmission feels like it's about to fall out. This is completely unacceptable for a vehicle of this price." The advisor, a calm professional named Michael, tried to soothe him. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Mr. Jacobs. If you could bring the vehicle in, our Lamborghini certified technicians will be happy to diagnose the issue immediately." "You bet I'll bring it in," Mark snarled. "And you'd better have a loaner car for me. Something decent, not a sedan. I expect this to be handled. Immediately." "Of course, sir. We'll take care of everything," Michael promised. Mark hung up, fuming. This was a colossal waste of his time. More than that, it was an embarrassment. What if someone saw him driving a loaner? What if the repairs took weeks? The entire ordeal chipped away at the flawless image he had worked so hard to project. As he prepared to drive to the dealership, his mind drifted back to Amelia's old Subaru. That car had been ugly, slow, and utterly devoid of status. But in the 10 years they'd owned it, it had never once broken down. It just worked. It was reliable, dependable, and unassuming. All the things Amelia was, all the things he had left her for. He shook the thought away. It was a momentary weakness. This was just a minor setback. He would go to the dealership, throw his weight around, and they would fix it. They had to. He had paid for perfection, and he would accept nothing less. He put on his sunglasses, straightened his jacket, and prepared to go to war. He was Mark Jacobs, and people like him didn't have to deal with rattling cars. The service entrance of Prestige Automotive Group was as clean and sterile as a hospital operating room. Technicians in immaculate branded overalls moved with quiet purpose around vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. Mark, however, was in no mood to appreciate the professionalism. He strode into the service reception area like a storm front, his face a mask of thunderous indignation. He bypassed the line and slammed his carbon fiber key fob onto the marble counter in front of Michael, the advisor he had spoken to on the phone. "Mark Jacobs, the yellow Lamborghini, the one that's falling apart." Michael, a man in his late 40s with a perpetually patient expression, didn't flinch. "Good morning, Mr. Jacobs. I'm sorry you're having issues. If you'll just give me a moment to pull up your file. I don't have a moment, Mark interrupted, his voice rising. Heads turned in the waiting area. I have a $500,000 car that rattles like a tin can and lurches like a broken-down taxi. What I want is a solution, not a file number. I understand your frustration, sir, Michael said, his tone still perfectly even. We'll get a master technician to look at it right away. In the meantime, we have a courtesy car ready for you. A brand new Audi A8. Mark scoffed. An A8, a sedan. Do I look like a man who drives a sedan? I bought a supercar. I expect a comparable loaner. Do you have a Porsche, another Lamborghini? I'm afraid our supercar loaners are currently assigned, sir, Michael explained calmly. The A8 is our highest-end courtesy vehicle available today. This was the ultimate insult. Mark felt his face flush with rage. This is a joke. Your dealership sells me a lemon and then you offer me a glorified family car. I want to speak to your manager. Now! Michael sighed, a barely perceptible gesture of resignation. Of course, sir. Let me get Mr. Miller. He disappeared into a back office, leaving Mark to tap his fingers impatiently on the counter. He was aware of the other customers staring at him, but he didn't care. Let them stare. Let them see what happens when you try to inconvenience a man like Mark Jacobs. A few minutes later, Michael returned with another man. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. He looked to be in his early 50s. Mr. Jacobs, I'm David Miller, the general manager for the Prestige Automotive Group. Michael has briefed me on the situation. I want to personally apologize for the issues you're experiencing with your Huracan. His apology was smooth, professional, but Mark was too deep in his righteous anger to be placated. An apology doesn't fix my car, David, Mark said, mispronouncing his last name as Miller. Your dealership's reputation is built on selling the best cars in the world. My experience has been anything but the best. You are absolutely right to be upset, David said, his composure unshakable. And I assure you we will make it right. I will have our top 2 technicians conduct a full diagnostic. We will find the source of every issue, and we will not return the car to you until it is in perfect condition. As for the loaner, I apologize that our other performance vehicles are unavailable. The demand is quite high. Then you have a systemic problem, Mark retorted. You're selling more faulty cars than you have loaners for. That's a bad business model. David Miller's professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. We pride ourselves on our customer service, Mr. Jacobs. I can assure you this is an unusual situation. Sometimes with high-performance hand-assembled machines like these, minor issues can arise in the initial break-in period. It's rare, but it happens. It happened to me, Mark said, jabbing a finger at his own chest. And I'm the customer who matters. A long, tense silence hung in the air. David Miller looked at Mark, his expression a careful blend of professional concern and something else, something Mark couldn't quite decipher. It was a look of assessment, as if he were sizing Mark up, not as a customer, but as a problem to be solved. Finally, David nodded. Mr. Jacobs, your satisfaction is our priority. Let me make a call. We have a new Porsche 911 Turbo S that was set to be a demonstrator vehicle. It's not typically used for loans, but in this case I'll make an exception. Will that be acceptable? Mark felt a small thrill of victory. He had pushed, and they had folded. That's more like it, he said, his tone softening slightly. Fine. A 911 will do. Excellent, David said. Michael will handle the paperwork for you, and I will personally oversee the service on your Lamborghini. I will call you with an update by the end of the day. As Mark signed the loaner agreement, he felt his sense of superiority returning. He had faced down the manager and gotten what he wanted. He was in control. As he walked out to the waiting Porsche, he threw a final glance back at David Miller, who was watching him with that same unreadable expression. Mark didn't know it, but his tantrum had set a new chain of events in motion. David Miller was a consummate professional, but he was also fiercely protective of his staff and his dealership. He had dealt with arrogant customers before, but there was a particular brand of venom in Mark Jacobs that had set off an internal alarm. When a customer became this problematic, especially with a brand new flagship car, there was a protocol. He had to inform the owner. David returned to his office, closed the door, and picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts to a name at the top of his favorites list. He pressed the call button. "Hi, Amelia," he said as soon as she answered. "Sorry to bother you. We have a situation here with a new Huracan customer. I think you're going to want to hear about this one." Amelia Sterling sat in her office, a bright, airy space that overlooked a bustling workshop. But this wasn't a workshop for cars. It was filled with long tables of supple leather, the quiet hum of industrial sewing machines, and the focused energy of a dozen artisans cutting, stitching, and finishing high-end handbags, briefcases, and wallets. Her company, Sterling and Hyde, had grown far beyond the little online shop Mark had mocked. It was now a globally recognized brand celebrated for its quality and timeless design, with a valuation that would have made Mark's consulting firm look like a lemonade stand. Her success hadn't been an accident. After the divorce, she had poured all her pain, all her frustration, and all her underestimated intelligence into her work. While Mark was focused on acquiring the appearance of wealth, Amelia had focused on building actual value. She had reinvested every dollar of profit, hired the best people, and obsessed over the quality of her product. Her biggest investment, however, had been a secret she kept from almost everyone. A few years ago, using the substantial profits from Sterling and Hyde, she had started diversifying. Her father had been a master mechanic, and she'd inherited his love for well-made machines and his disdain for flashy but unreliable junk. She saw an opportunity in the luxury automotive market, not just in selling cars, but in providing unparalleled service. She began acquiring local dealerships, starting with a struggling Porsche franchise. She brought in her own management focused on customer experience over high-pressure sales and turned it around in 18 months. From there, she had quietly, methodically built a small empire. She called it the Prestige Automotive Group. It now included Porsche, Audi, BMW, and its crown jewel, the Lamborghini franchise she had acquired just last year. She wasn't a hands-on owner in the daily sense. She trusted her hand-picked general managers like David Miller to run the show. She preferred the quiet satisfaction of seeing balance sheets grow and customer satisfaction scores soar. Almost no one, and certainly not her ex-husband, knew she was the sole owner. It was her quiet personal triumph. When her phone buzzed with David's name, she picked it up immediately. He rarely called her during the day unless it was important. "Hi, Amelia," he began. "Sorry to bother you. We have a situation here with a new Huracan customer. I think you're going to want to hear about this one." "It's fine, David. What's going on?" she asked, swiveling in her chair to look out at her thriving workshop. David recounted the entire story: the sale of the yellow Huracan 3 weeks prior, the customer's litany of complaints, and the aggressive, demeaning way he had treated the service staff, culminating in his demand for a supercar loaner. "He's a particularly nasty piece of work," David said, his professional voice edged with disdain. "He berated Michael, made a scene in the reception area, and told me our business model was failing because we couldn't give him a Lamborghini loaner on the spot. The name is Mark Jacobs." Amelia's hand, which had been doodling on a notepad, froze. A cold, heavy silence filled her end of the line. It couldn't be. The world was large, but the world of people buying yellow Lamborghinis in their city was vanishingly small. "Amelia, are you there?" David asked, concerned by her silence. "Yes, David, I'm here," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the shock that was coursing through her. "Tell me this Mark Jacobs. What does he look like?" David described him perfectly. Tall, impeccably dressed, dark hair, and air of profound self-importance. He even mentioned the expensive-looking sunglasses he wore indoors. Amelia leaned back in her chair and let out a slow, quiet breath. So that was it. The chance encounter at the coffee shop hadn't been a chance at all. It had been a performance, a calculated move to flaunt his new purchase in her face. And now the symbol of his triumph had malfunctioned, leading him right back into her world without him having the faintest idea. The irony was so thick, so perfect, it was almost comical. "The issues with the car," she asked, her mind now sharp and focused. "Are they legitimate?" "Our master tech is looking at it now," David said. The check engine light was a faulty oxygen sensor, an easy fix covered completely under warranty. "We haven't found any evidence of a transmission slip. He might have just been unfamiliar with the feel of a dual-clutch system. As for the rattle, we think we found it. There was a loose piece of heat shielding in the rear wheel well. Again, a simple fix. These are all minor new car bugs." His reaction was wildly disproportionate. "I see," Amelia said, a plan beginning to form in her mind. For 5 years she had let Mark's parting words, a cute little hobby, be the fuel for her fire. She had never sought revenge, believing that living well was the best kind. But now revenge, or at least a form of final definitive justice, had walked right through her front door and demanded to speak to the manager. She could have let David handle it. He was more than capable. But this felt different. This was personal. This was a chapter of her life that needed a proper resounding ending. Mark had built his entire identity on a foundation of superficial symbols, and she now had the power to detonate that foundation with a single simple truth. "David," she said, her voice now cool and decisive, "I want you to handle the repairs perfectly. Detail the car inside and out. Make it better than new. And call Mr. Jacobs tomorrow. Tell him the car is ready, but that due to the extreme nature of his complaints, the owner of the dealership group wants to meet with him personally to apologize and ensure he is satisfied before he takes delivery." There was a pause on David's end. "The owner, you mean? You want to meet him?" "Yes," Amelia said. "I'll be there tomorrow at 3 p.m. Don't tell him my name. Just say that the owner, Ms. Sterling, will be meeting him. Let's see how he responds to that." "Understood," David said, a hint of admiration in his voice. He knew there was a story here, but he was professional enough not to ask. After she hung up, Amelia stood and walked to the large window of her office. She looked down at the beautiful, tangible products being created by the company she had built from nothing. Then she thought of Mark, a man so insecure he needed a car to scream his worth to the world. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt a profound sense of pity, and a quiet, steely resolve. Tomorrow she wouldn't be meeting him as his ex-wife. She would be meeting him as the architect of a world he desperately wanted to be a part of, but could never truly understand. The next afternoon, Mark Jacobs walked back into the Prestige Automotive Group dealership with a swagger. The call from David Miller had been music to his ears. Not only was his car fixed in record time, but his complaint had apparently gone all the way to the top. The owner wanted to personally apologize to him. This was the level of service he deserved, the recognition he commanded. He imagined the owner would be an older man, some silver-haired tycoon named Mr. Prestige, who would shake his hand, offer him free service for a year, and thank him for holding them to a higher standard. He had even practiced his response, a magnanimous, "I appreciate you taking this seriously. I'm a reasonable man, I just expect excellence." He found David waiting for him in the main showroom, standing beside the gleaming yellow Lamborghini. It looked flawless, even more brilliant than the day he'd bought it. "Mr. Jacobs," David said with a polite nod, "your car is ready. The technicians have addressed all the issues, and we've given it a full concours-level detail as our apology." "Good," Mark said, running a hand over the car's perfect finish. "It looks right, at least. Now, where's the owner? You said she wanted to see me." He had been surprised to learn the owner was a Ms. Sterling, picturing some stern, intimidating businesswoman in her 60s. "Ms. Sterling is on her way down. She's just concluding a meeting in her office upstairs," David said, gesturing toward a sleek glass-paneled staircase that led to the second floor. Mark was impressed. An office in the dealership. This owner was clearly hands-on. He felt a swell of importance. He, Mark Jacobs, was a customer so significant that the owner herself was coming down to placate him. He spent a few minutes circling his car, admiring his reflection in the waxed paint, feeling the power of the moment. This was how the world was supposed to work. The powerful men like him were catered to. Then he heard the soft click of heels on the glass staircase. He turned, a self-satisfied smile already forming on his face, ready to graciously accept the apology he was owed. A woman was descending the stairs. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored navy blue dress. Her brown hair was tied back. Her expression was calm, composed, and utterly familiar. Mark's smile froze, then melted from his face. His brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. It was Amelia, his ex-wife. Amelia who sold leather bags online. Amelia who drove a Subaru. What in God's name was she doing here? His first panicked thought was that she worked here. He felt a surge of cruel, vindictive glee. This was even better than he could have imagined. He had come in to complain, and they had sent his ex-wife, a saleswoman or maybe a receptionist, to deal with him. The universe was truly on his side. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked toward him. David Miller stepped aside respectfully. "Amelia," Mark blurted out, a mocking laugh already bubbling in his throat. "What are you doing here? Did they really send you out to handle customer complaints now? Working your way up in the world, are we?" Amelia stopped a few feet from him. She didn't flinch at his insult. Her calm, steady gaze met his. "Hello, Mark," she said, her voice clear and even, carrying easily in the quiet showroom. "I see you've met my general manager, David." Mark's brain stuttered. "My general manager." The words didn't compute. He looked from Amelia to David, who was watching him with a completely neutral expression. You're what?" Mark stammered. Amelia gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I heard there was an issue with your car. I wanted to make sure it was resolved to your satisfaction." The pieces began to click into place with agonizing slowness, each one a hammer blow to his ego. The name David had mentioned on the phone, Ms. Sterling. Her calm amusement at the cafe. Her complete lack of surprise now. It was impossible. It was a nightmare. "You're Ms. Sterling," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I am," she confirmed. "Amelia Sterling. I own the Prestige Automotive Group, this dealership, the Porsche and Audi centers down the road too. That little online shop did better than you ever imagined." The world tilted on its axis. The bright lights of the showroom seemed to dim. The air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. He looked at the screaming yellow Lamborghini, his ultimate symbol of success over her, and saw it for what it was. A gaudy toy he had bought from his ex-wife's store. He hadn't been showing off his success to her. He had been personally handing her a massive check funding the very empire that was now dwarfing his own. His entire sense of self, the carefully constructed edifice of superiority he had built over the last 5 years, crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. He saw the scene at the cafe with horrifying new clarity, his arrogant boasting, his condescending questions, her quiet, knowing smile. She hadn't been indifferent. She had been entertained. He wasn't a king showing off to a commoner. He was the court jester performing for the queen, and he hadn't even known it. He looked at David Miller, who was now watching him with an expression of faint professional pity. He thought of Michael, the service advisor he had berated. They all knew. They all worked for her. "We've fixed the faulty sensor in the heat shield," Amelia continued, her voice bringing him back to the crushing reality of the moment. "There was nothing wrong with the transmission. It's a high-performance clutch. It feels different. Perhaps you should read the owner's manual. David can show you where it is." Every calm professional word was a dagger. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't gloating. She was simply stating facts, and her composure was more humiliating than any tirade could ever be. Mark stood there speechless. His face burned with a shame so profound it felt like a physical illness. He had wanted to show Amelia he had won. Instead, she had revealed in the most devastatingly quiet way possible that he had never even been in the race. He was nothing. A loud, obnoxious customer in her flawlessly run business. "Is there anything else we can help you with, Mr. Jacobs?" Amelia asked, her tone polite, professional, and utterly final. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head, grabbed the key fob from the counter, and practically fled to the car. He fumbled with the door, the elegant scissor mechanism now feeling impossibly clumsy. He slumped into the driver's seat, the smell of expensive leather now choking him. He didn't look back as he fired up the engine and sped out of the dealership, the roar of the V10 no longer sounding like victory, but like the desperate hollow scream of his own shattered ego. Mark drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring into streaks of crimson and gold through his unfocused eyes. The Lamborghini, once a resonant chamber for his pride, now felt like a sarcophagus. A very loud, very yellow sarcophagus, broadcasting his spectacular demise to the entire world. The Alcantara-wrapped steering wheel, which hours ago felt like the helm of a conquering vessel, was now slick and foreign under his clammy grip. The engine's ferocious roar, a sound he had equated with power and dominance, was now a grating, obnoxious shriek that attracted the one thing he could no longer bear attention. Every pedestrian who turned their head, every driver who stared at a red light felt like a judge and jury, their eyes piercing the thin veneer of his success and seeing the hollow man within. He finally found himself parked in a deserted, scenic overlook, a place he and Tiffany had once come to take a king of the city selfie with the skyline. Now, the glittering panorama of the city, including the distant illuminated spire of his own penthouse, seemed to mock him. He rested his forehead against the cold steering wheel, the smell of Italian leather once so intoxicating now turning his stomach. The scene in the showroom replayed in his mind on a torturous, unending loop. It wasn't a memory. It was a brand seared onto his consciousness. Amelia's face not angry or smug, but simply calm, as if she were discussing quarterly earnings. Her words precise and devastating, "I own the Prestige Automotive Group." The respectful step back David Miller had taken. The sudden horrifying realization that every employee in that building, from the salesman who sold him the car to the technician who fixed the rattle, answered to her. They had all witnessed his pathetic, arrogant performance. He had strutted into her kingdom, puffing up his chest, and demanded to speak to the queen, all while believing she was a peasant in a distant village. His entire life felt like a lie. The consulting firm, built on a foundation of unshakable bravado, now seemed fragile. His confidence had been his primary asset, and Amelia had just bankrupted it. He thought of Tiffany. Oh God, Tiffany. Their entire relationship was transactional. He provided the lifestyle, the symbols, the social currency, and she provided the beauty, the youth, the validation. But his currency had just been revealed as counterfeit. What would happen when she found out the story was too good, too deliciously ironic, not to spread like wildfire through their social circles? He wasn't the powerful Mark Jacobs anymore. He was a punchline. Across town, Amelia Sterling was also driving. Her journey, however, was not aimless. She was heading home. Her vehicle of choice was a dark gray Porsche Taycan Turbo S, a car that represented a different kind of power. It was electric, and as it sliced through the city streets, it was almost completely silent. The absence of a roaring engine left space for thought, for reflection. The silence was its strength. She had received a call from David Miller shortly after Mark had fled the dealership, his tires squealing in a final impotent display of aggression. "I have to say, Amelia," David had said, a rare note of genuine amusement in his professional voice, "in my 25 years in this business, that was the most satisfying customer interaction I have ever witnessed." The look on his face, it was a masterpiece. "Just ensure his file is noted, David," she had replied, her voice even. "He's to be treated like any other customer from now on, professionally and politely. No more, no less. His money is green." There was no thrill of victory coursing through her veins, no giddy desire to gloat. Instead, she felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a weight she hadn't fully realized she was carrying had been lifted. For 5 years, Mark's parting insults and his utter dismissal of her potential had been a small sharp pebble in her shoe. She had built her life and her businesses as a response, proving him wrong in a dialogue only she could hear. Today the dialogue had become public, and it was over. She had closed the book. Arriving at her home, the warm, inviting house filled with books, art, and the comfortable scent of worn leather from her workshop, she felt a deep sense of peace. This was real. The feel of the worn oak floors under her feet, the sight of her sleeping dog on the rug, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done. These were the things that constituted her life, not the fleeting admiration of strangers on the street. The fallout for Mark was as swift and brutal as his humiliation had been. The following week he drove the Lamborghini not to Prestige Automotive, but to a rival high-end consignment shop. He couldn't bear the thought of facing Amelia's employees again. The dealer, sensing his desperation, gave him a lowball offer. Mark took it without argument, the six-figure loss a tangible price for his hubris. The story reached Tiffany 2 days later. A friend of a friend who worked in detailing at Prestige had recounted the entire glorious tale. Tiffany didn't confront him with tears or accusations of deceit about his past. She confronted him with cold, pragmatic horror. "You let her do that to you?" She'd shrieked, her face a mask of disbelief. "She owns the dealership. Mark, everyone is talking about it. We look like a joke." He saw then with chilling clarity that she was never with him. She was with the idea of him, the penthouse, the Lamborghini. The moment the symbol was tarnished, the connection was severed. She packed her bags that night, her departure less an emotional breakup and more a strategic business divestment. His professional life followed a similar trajectory. The unshakable, borderline arrogant confidence that had won him clients was gone, replaced by a nervous, haunted energy. Clients sensed it. Deals stalled. His empire, built on the shifting sands of perception, began to wash away with the tide. He had spent 5 years desperately trying to prove he was a winner. It took Amelia 5 minutes to show him he had fundamentally misunderstood the meaning of the word. He had been chasing the echo of success, the applause and the accolades, while she had been in the studio quietly composing the symphony. Amelia never saw Mark Jacobs again. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in his ruin, but in her own quiet contentment. She continued to build her businesses, to innovate, to lead with a steady hand. Her greatest revenge was not the look of utter devastation on his face in that showroom. It was the simple, peaceful pleasure of the next morning, walking into her leather workshop, the smell of her own success in the air. Her past a closed chapter, and her future an open, beautifully crafted book that was entirely and indisputably her own. What an incredible story of quiet confidence versus loud arrogance. Amelia Sterling proves that true success doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It speaks for itself through hard work, intelligence, and integrity. While Mark was busy buying symbols of success, Amelia was busy building the very institutions he looked up to. It's a powerful lesson in humility, and a reminder that the loudest person in the room is often the weakest. What did you think of Mark's downfall? Was it the perfect serving of karma, or do you feel a shred of pity for him? And how perfectly did Amelia handle that final reveal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story of karma and empowerment, show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribing to our channel for more real-life drama and inspiring stories. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update from us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.